Are you someone who wants to play a character who's swinging a sword in the middle of battle while simultaneously using destructive magic to take down their foes? If this is you, then you, my friend, are an Eldritch Knight. Hi, my name is Coleman Webb, and today we are going to learn how to make an Eldritch Knight in Daggerheart. One of the things that is unique about this tabletop RPG is how flexible and open it is. And one of the things that I've seen in the community is how to make specific character builds, and there seems to be a lot of discussion. So, what these videos are designed to do is to become a guide on how you can create the character that you want to play, whether it's something that is an archetype from another TTRPG system or something based on a fictional character. We're going to work on building these characters together. So strap in, grab
Is to
your
create the
sword, your
best
shield,
sword and
as well as your
shield.
spell book, because
Okay.
we are going to make an Eldritch Knight. My goal for the Eldritch Knight is to create the best sword and board frontline support character that we can while simultaneously dishing out a ton of damage. And we're going to be able to build that. And spoiler, this comes online right at level 1. So let's dive into the build. The character sheet that I'm going to be building today is something that I developed on Quest Portal. I'm going to have a link below that'll give you access to all the different character sheets for every single class in Daggerheart. These basically have things that are built in there, basically all the weapons and armor tables, all the way up through tier 4, every single domain and Ancestry. All these cards are all built in. So if you are watching this video and you like this character sheet, I'm going to give you a link to it and you can just use it for free. So you're welcome in advance. So the first thing I want to do is I want to lay down a few ground rules. I really just have a couple. The first one is that the goal is to get this character playing in the archetype as quickly as possible. And that's kind of a big deal because in Daggerheart, if you want to multi-class, and you can't do that until level 5. And what that effectively means for you is that you can't multi-class until halfway through the max level cap, which is 10. So the goal of trying to get these characters online as quickly as possible is really paramount. The second thing we want to do is we want to play as close to the archetype that we're trying to build. So what that means is, for me today, the Eldritch Knight in my mind is a sword and shield wielder, right? And so that is something that we're going to build. So I want to use the attributes and the weapons tables to create that as close as possible, which sort of leads me to my third point, which is we want to try to limit the amount of flexibility in homebrew that we do, simply for the fact that I think some of us coming from different systems might find that trying to reflavor a Warhammer just to use strength can be done, but maybe it feels a little bit off. So again, we're going to try to use the weapons that the tables and the rulebook gives us. Feel free to go a different direction. These are not set in stone or hard and fast in any shape or form. But for the builds, this is what we're going to try to do. So let's go ahead and get started. So for our starting class for the Eldritch Knight, we are going to go with Wizard. And that might come as a shock to some of you because coming from other systems, you might be jumping into something similar to like a fighter where you're going to have this martial background. Cool thing about Daggerheart is that we can build this and get this going really right from level 1. The wizard's class hope feature is called Not This Time. The wizard can spend 3 hope to cause an enemy adversary to re-roll an attack or damage roll. And this can be used by any adversary within far range, which is a really, really solid support ability. The wizard's class feature is called Strange Patterns. And the way this works is that after you take a long rest, you're going to pick a number between 1 and 12. And anytime you roll that number on the duality dice, you either gain a hope or you clear a stress. And this is really important for 2 reasons. One is because when you roll the duality dice, you're rolling 2 of them. So every time you roll, there is a almost 16% chance that you are going to clear stress or gain a hope, which is big. And to put that in perspective, if you roll just 6 times per session, you're getting like a 65% chance to clear stress. Or if you roll as many as 10 times in a session, you're going to have over an 82% chance to clear stress, which is pretty cool. Now, the other thing that's nice, and this is the big thing, is that it also works on reaction rolls. So, rules is written, when you make a reaction roll, you roll the duality dice, but it doesn't generate hope or fear. There's nothing here that says that you don't get to take advantage of your class feature when you use a reaction roll. So, check with your DM, but I'm pretty sure that that would count. So, next we're going to move to Ancestry. And the Ancestry that I'm going to recommend that's trying to be this beast, sword, and shield frontline tank that's trying to support their party is going to be an Ancestry mix. And the first Ancestry that we're going to look at is the Dracona. And the way that the rules work when you do a mixed ancestry, can't even say that out loud. So the way that mixed ancestries work is that you pick two of the ancestry cards and you take one of the top features and one from the bottom features of each card. The ancestry feature we want from the Dracona is scales. And what this basically does is this makes it so when you take severe damage, which is the highest damage threshold you can mark a stress and reduce that by 1. This is basically the get back up feature from the blade domain that you get for free. This is awesome. And so the second ancestry that we're going to pick is going to be the fawn. And because we took the first feature of the Dracona, this means we have to take the second feature from the fawn. And if I'm making any type of melee character and I am a min-maxer, I am probably almost always going to take kick from the fawn. And the reason to me is because it's just absolutely awesome. Let's read what it says. When you succeed on an attack against a target within melee range, you can mark a stress to kick yourself off them, dealing 2d6 damage and knocking back either yourself or the target to very close range. So what this means is that when you succeed on attack, mark the stress, you can push an enemy 5 to 10 feet away from you, which is a big deal of having forced movement that just works. When I think about the mixed ancestry of a Dracona and a Fawn, it makes me wonder what that wedding would have looked like between the parents. Like you would have seen like the groom and the bride side, and you just see a bunch of Dracona lined up on one side and the fawns on the other, and it just would have been wild. Just having people ask, who are you here for, the bride or the groom? You'd have just like maybe a bunch of like lizard type people on the left side, and a bunch of fawns on the other. I think it'd be pretty funny. And if you are struggling with what this character would look like, I actually had my daughter draw a picture of what that would look like. And that's going to be right there. So if you need inspiration, you've got it right there from my daughter, Scarlet Ray. So you're welcome. The next thing we're going to look at is the community. Now, I'm going to just basically say pick whatever community you want that you feel like your character would be from. But if we are trying to maybe get a little bit of an edge from a damage or from I want to say like a mechanical standpoint, I think the best one that we have to take is going to be Seaborn. So basically what this says is that you can sense the ebb and flow of life. When you roll with fear, place a token on this card. You can hold a number of tokens equal to your level before you make an action roll. You can spend any number of these tokens to gain a +1 bonus to the roll for each of the tokens spent. At the end of each session, clear all the unspent tokens. So this is interesting, and I think this actually has some really good synergies for the direction that we're going to be going with this character, because when you roll with fear, that's usually going to happen about 50% of the time. So at level 1, yeah, it's maybe a +1, but maybe you just burn that on whatever roll you have so you can keep earning that. But if you don't feel like that community background fits for you, that's okay. Pick something different. You don't have to be married to this. I just feel like mechanically this is probably the strongest one in the game so far. So for starting equipment, remember, we're trying to create the best sword and board frontline support character possible as an Eldritch Knight. Now, for me, because we want to stick as close as possible to the weapons table themselves without reflavoring, I am going to take a broadsword. And the reason being is because, as you can see here, that this just has a burden of 1 hand. So that means that I don't have to have 2 hands to equip it like I would with like a great sword. The other thing that's nice about the broadsword is I get a +1 to my attack rolls with it, which is a fantastic feature. So the other thing that we're going to be having equipped in our secondary weapon is we are going to be taking a tower shield. And here's the reason. The reason is because this is going to give us +2 to our armor score. And we are going to be, by the time we are said and done with all the things that we're picking for this character, we are going to be having the Guardian side-eyeing us as the frontline tank. And I'm pretty stoked about it. So we're taking the Tower Shield. Now, this does have uh, something called Barrier, where it does give you +2 to that armor score, as I mentioned earlier, but you take a -1 to your evasion. So that means you're just going to be easier to hit, and I'm okay with that. And when we look at armor, I am going to say take chainmail armor here. And here's the reason. One is because it's going to give us 4 armor slots. So right out the gate with the Tower Shield and this feature, we're going to have 6 armor slots, which is awesome. Now, this also gives us another -1 to our evasion, which isn't great, makes us a little bit easier to hit. But here's the key factor, is that this has the second highest damage thresholds for tier 1 play, which is important. Now, you could, if you wanted to, and it was really important for you to try to get those thresholds up as high as possible, take full plate armor, but now you're taking a -2 to your evasion and a -1 to your agility. And because I do want to use a broadsword in some situations to where I'm going to be swinging and attacking enemies, trying to inflict physical damage, don't want to necessarily handicap those rolls going forward. But if you are planning on using maybe a different weapon, or you want to take strength, or maybe you want to be the face of the party and take presence or something like that, and going to use a rapier, that's totally fine. You can do that. In that case, full plate armor would be good if you're going to have agility be your dump stat, and that's a-okay. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at our damage thresholds. So as you can see right now, by wearing chainmail armor, we are going to basically, anything that's a 7 or lower is only going to cause us to take 1 point of damage, which is minor, which we could use an armor slot for if we wanted to. If we then move to the major damage thresholds, which is 8 to 16. So if the damage dealt to us lands between there, we're marking 2, which is going to be basically 1 armor slot in health. But if we get hit by something that does 17 or more points of damage, that's our severe damage threshold, and we are going to be taking, basically 3 points of damage, which we could use an armor slot to reduce that. And that's part of the reason why I also wanted to go Dracona, is because having that feature to scales to reduce that by causing a stress, I think is really, really handy, especially for a tank. So now let's talk about the stats that we're going to want to have with this character. So as you can see here, these are the default recommended. And so our spellcast trait with the wizard is knowledge. So we want that to be the highest number possible. So we're going to leave that at 2. And for this character, I'm not necessarily wanting to be the face of the party. I want to be the face tank of the party, but not the face. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically move that to be my -1. Save that. And I'm going to move my agility to be my +1. And now, when I attack with my broadsword, I now have a +2 to hit, which is the same as what my spellcast trait is. So that's going to be nice. So now my agility is going to be 1, which is really sort of where I want it. These are flexible. So again, if you decide you want to do something different, you can. If you say, I'm going to dump agility, go plate armor, have a -2 there. If it's a -1, it's -3. I can't run at all. That's totally fine. You can do that. And maybe you are using a mace, or maybe you're using the greatsword. Play the character however you want to. But again, in the interest of trying to keep it as close as possible, agility is going to be sort of that secondary stat that we're going to try to increase as we level up. Now we are going to pick our subclass, and every character in Daggerheart has 2 subclasses, and we are absolutely, without the shadow of a doubt, taking the School of War. This is actually uh, one of my favorite subclasses, because I think it just hits the nail on the head for the spell swords or wanting to play that Gish type character. And let's take a look at some of the things you get as a School of War subclass. So the first thing you get is Battle Mage. You've focused your studies on becoming an unconquerable force on the battlefield, gain an additional hit point. This is awesome. This just means right out the gate, you're going to be much tankier than your peers, especially from as a spellcasters, which generally have lower starting HP than your more beefier classes like the Guardians or the Seraphs. Now, this is the other thing that we are here for, and this is absolutely awesome. This is Face Your Fear. So when you succeed with Fear on an attack roll, you deal an extra 1d10 magic damage. Okay, let's break down what this means. So basically, we're going to assume that 50% of your successes, you're going to succeed with Fear, which is kind of how math works, right? So on average, a D10 die does 5.5 damage, right? So you would, if it hit with every time, you'd be adding 5.5, but because this is only 50% of the time, we're going to be adding about 2.75 damage to our rolls, which is actually a big deal in Daggerheart because the numbers and damage that you implement are so much smaller than in other TTRPGs that this at really first tier play level 1 is absolutely awesome. So now we're going to get into the domains. And there is one domain that you have to take for this build to basically start at level 1, and you're going to basically keep using these abilities till probably the end game, or you find a really powerful weapon, whichever comes first. So the first domain that we're going to take is going to be the Book of Ava. And you get several good spells from this, but the most important and the thing that we are going to build this character around is Power Push. So let's read what it says. You make a spell cast roll against a target within melee range. On a success, they're knocked back to far range and take d10 plus 2 magic damage using your proficiency. Okay, this is awesome. So the way that I envision this is that you are using that broadsword, that one-handed sword or one-handed weapon, or if you chose to take a different weapon, whatever weapon it is, you are channeling that blade, delivering this spellcast strike. And that to me is not only just cool from a flavor standpoint, but mechanically this does two really big things. So first, if we just look at the damage from this, this is going to be a D10, which is 5.5 points of damage, plus 2 makes it 7.5 points. We add the feature of Face Your Fear, which on average is 2.75 additional points of damage, and we're doing 10.25 points of damage on average with this character at level 1. To put this into perspective, the hardest hitting weapon that you can have is the Greatsword. It's not, even though I think it's the Warhammer that uses the D12, it's actually the Greatsword. And the reason being is because you get the ability to re-roll the dice. So that moves it from 5.5 to I think it's like 7.1 or 7.13. And then you add 3. So you're actually doing more damage than the Greatsword. And this is just a melee spell attack that you are making. I'm flavoring it with the broadsword, and that is awesome. Additionally, when you use a greatsword, you have to take a -1 penalty to your evasion. So that's fantastic. Now, the second reason this is incredible is because when you succeed on an attack, you are pushing your enemies back to far range. And the way that the rules in Daggerheart work is that if a enemy or an adversary wants to make an attack, a melee attack to you, and they're in far range, they have to make an agility roll and exceed a specific DC just to get back into range. So I want you to imagine this. You are this huge Eldritch Knight, and you have this big enemy with a massive great axe trying to tee off on your bard or tee off on your sorcerer, and you come in and you hit them with this power push, and you're knocking back to far range and just positioning yourself in front of them, and you're just playing the best game of keep away from your most vulnerable allies. And that is what I think makes this probably one of the best tanks in the game. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at their second feature, which is Tava's armor. The way this works is that you spend a hope to give a target you can touch a +1 bonus to their armor score until their next rest, or you cast it again. So basically, if you have a hope, you cast this on yourself, you now have 7 slots of armor. And that's huge. And for me, when I think about a character that is going to be a frontline tank, you want to have armor slots to be able to absorb those hits for your squishy allies. Awesome feature. You also get Ice Spike, which is cool. This just gives you basically a ranged magical attack. You basically make a spell cast roll and you summon an Ice Spike. And if you succeed, you deal d6 worth of damage. Um, yeah, so just nice ranged option in case you don't have an enemy or you don't want to make an agility roll and can't get within range. I think it's just a nice option to have. When it comes to the second domain card you can choose, it's really going to be a matter of pick your preference, right? I would probably lean maybe towards the Book of Iliad. And the main reason for that is because Arcane Barrage isn't a bad way if you've got a ton of hope built up and you need to get rid of it in battle. You can just spend a number of hope and you basically automatically hit the target and roll a number of d6s for the hope you spend, which is pretty great. No roll, no generating hope or fear or making a spell cast roll to see if it hits. It's just free damage. Now, well, free, I say that and you're spending hope. But the other reason I think I would take this is because of telepathy. And this is just a really important, I've actually seen this in the game that I'm playing. We had to split the party up, and the wizard used this on my Seraph, and we were able to communicate while we were split up. So basically, you spend a hope and you open a line of mental communication with one target you can see. It lasts until your next rest. So there's no time limit on it, and I think that this is just a really good utility. If you really wanted to, you could look at the if you really want to, you could look at the Book of Typhor. That does have like Magic Hand, which is kind of like their version of Mage Hand. The other thing that's nice though is it does have Wild Flame, which basically allows you to make a spell cast roll, and you're going to be doing 2d6 worth of magic damage, and the enemies have to mark a stress, and that hits up to 3 adversaries in melee range. So if you're, really in the thick of it and you're surrounded, really nice AoE attack that also marks some stress, which I think is really nice. And this doesn't use any resources, so it's not like you got to spend hope or fear. It's just an AoE attack. And 2d6 magic damage on multiple enemies isn't anything to sneeze at. On average, you're doing 7. If you're hitting 2 enemies, you're doing 14 points of damage on average in total. So pretty nice. You do also, I want to note, have access to the Splendor domain. I don't particularly love the first level Splendor options. I would say that, maybe if you don't have a healer, Mending Touch is okay, but it's not like it's a combat heal. You've got to spend a few minutes working with an adversary, and if you happen to chat with them, you can spend 2 hope to clear 1 or 2 HP, depending on how you do it, or stress. So it's nice, probably utility if there's no other healers, but not my favorite. Though Bolt Beacon's nice because this actually does allow you to attack an enemy within far range. You're doing a D8, using your proficiency +2 with damage, and the target does become vulnerable, so the next attack gets that additional D6 against them, has advantage, which is great. But you have to spend a hope to do that. So again, pick your preference. I don't think there's any right or wrong answers. As far as experiences go, these are going to be sort of up to you and what you want to take. If you wanted to take something that is going to maybe increase your non-magical attack from your broadsword, maybe you would create an experience called uh, Hand on the Hilt, right? And what that just means is that anytime you're swinging the sword and want to, hit without using your spellcast trait, which in rare circumstances might make sense, you could have that be a +2. So if you really felt bad about, wow, my agility is a +1 and my spellcast rate's +2, go ahead and add that. So now what happens is if you want to increase your chance to hit by 2, you go ahead and use a hope, and it's going to add 2 to your duality dice roll, which is great. Or vice versa, maybe you want to have something that is called let's go called Spellsword. When you have a spell, might help. Sword. And maybe what this is anytime you use your sword to make a spell cast within melee range, you get a +2. So talk to your DM, see if that's something he'll allow. But especially if you can build up hope or you're using strange patterns, you're getting additional hope. This will allow you to at least increase your chance to hit with some of those. So just some food for thought and something to think about if you are wanting to increase your chance to hit when you're creating this character. So let's talk about some of the tactics you would do right now at tier one. So what I would be looking at doing is positioning myself in front of the closest adversaries, words are hard, to my party. And I would basically be trying to knock them as far away as possible. And then trying to stay close enough to where any adversary that tries to engage, I'm going to be the first person in front of them. At this point, we are going to be very tanky because we are going to have an armor score of 7 and our damage thresholds are going to be higher than probably most of our party members. Now, we are going to be much easier to hit due to our lower evasion score, but that's okay. That's what it's designed to do as a tank. You're there to take damage and to support your party in, as many ways as you possibly can. And remember, because we're a Dracona, if we do happen to get hit with a critical and we take that severe damage, we can just mark a stress and reduce that to major damage. And now we're only marking 1 HP slot and 1 base armor score. And that's huge. Now, there may be some instances where you maybe fight an enemy that has magical resistances or magical immunities. And if you do, then that is exactly why we still have the broadsword that we can use to make those attacks. And we're going to be using our agility. Now, in addition to the damage that we're doing from power push, we are going to, as often as possible, be applying our kick feature that we have as a fawn. And so what that does is that when we mark a stress, we are adding 2d6, which on average is an increase of our damage output by 7. So basically, we go to doing over 17 points of damage when we activate our kick feature using this tactic. And that is awesome. I don't know how many enemies or how quick you would actually start knocking down some of these foes if you were doing 17 points of damage. To put this into perspective, if you were fighting the Jagged Knife Bandits, which is the standard bandit adversary sheet that you would be facing in tier 1, their severe damage threshold is 14. So that means that if you're doing on average 17 points of damage when you mark a stress and use that feature, you are basically almost one-shotting these bandits, which is crazy. So again, as I look at this build, this is why right from the go, you are just a force to be reckoned with. Now, something that's also really important is that that feature allows you to move 5 or 10 feet. So if you move into range, not only are you knocking a character back, but then you are also moving an additional 5 or 10 feet, either back closer to your allies, or maybe you're jumping closer to the next ally to try to, position yourself in between them, which is incredible. All right, so level 2, what we are going to be doing first and foremost is trying to increase our chance to hit. So what I would do is I would say, let's gain a +1 bonus to 2 unmarked character traits. So again, going back to our character sheet, what that means is that I'm going to increase my agility to 2, and I'm going to increase my knowledge to 3. So now that we have that done, what we then get to do is pick a new domain card from either one of our domains. So let's take a look at what we're going to pick. So for our level 2 domain card, we're going to be taking the Book of Sigil. So the reason here is because we are most interested in I can't even pronounce this. Yeah, whatever. Anyways, you know what it is. So what this basically does is that you get to spend 2 hope to cast a spell on yourself or an ally within close range. The next time the target makes an attack, they can hit an additional target within range of their attack roll would succeed against. You can only hold this spell on 1 creature at a time. So basically what this does is this basically makes it so if you are in a mob of enemies and you have this cast on yourself, you can basically use that same spellcast roll, and if it would hit, deal damage to both of those enemies. So that is awesome. That really doubles our damage output when it comes to uh, being that frontline tank. Now, something else that I should add is that at level 2, we also get an increase in our proficiency. So what that means is that when we roll for damage, whether we're going to be using power push or our weapon, we are now increasing the number of dice we roll to 2. So again, that D10 plus 2 from before is now 2D10 plus 2. That D8 is now 2D8. Also, one thing that I do want to put into perspective is that I won't be updating all of the weapon and armors per tier. And the reason being is because I don't know what kind of loot or what kind of weapons you're going to be acquiring throughout the adventure. So if you happen to get a really good sword and it actually ends up being better than the power push, I seriously doubt it. But if it is, then you can go ahead and use that. So I'm trying to build a sustainable character from start to finish using the abilities given and received as we level up. But again, if you get some awesome loot, that's wonderful. It means your DM's doing their job. If not, it means your DM's a Grinch, or at least a Scrooge, because he's, not giving out the sweet, sweet loot that we all deserve from adventuring. So now moving on to level 3, I'm going to now lean more into the tankiness factor of my character. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to increase my hit point by 1 additional slot, and I'm also going to add another stress slot. So for our level 3 domain card, we are going to be dipping into the Splendor domain to take one of my favorite level 3 cards that the game has, and it is going to be Second Wind. And this is awesome. So once per rest, so it's not once per session or once per long rest, once per rest, when you succeed against attack against an enemy, you can clear 3 stress or a hit point. And on a success with hope, you get to clear 3 stress or recover a hit point for an ally that's within close range of you. This is an amazing feature for a couple of reasons. One, this is going to allow us to continuously use our feature kick at least 11 times per, you know, day, if you would. But even more than that, if we're taking multiple rests, right? Again, you roll a critical, you're reducing a stress. So that is huge. That's like getting an extra 21 points of damage just for having this feature that you get, and you don't have to worry about maxing out your stress. So really, really fantastic. I would probably take this on a lot of different characters. I plan on taking it on my Seraph when we get to level 3. It's looking at you, Steve. When we get to level 3, hint, hint, level us up. I'm just kidding. We're moving at a good pace. Don't take it personal. And then there is one honorable mention that I would, or maybe there's two honorable mentions I would look at. The first was going to be Voice of Reason. Now, the first part of this domain card, if you take a look, is it just basically gives you advantage on action rolls to de-escalate violent situations or convince someone of your lead. It's not really a big deal for us because we've got a -1 to our presence. So yay for not being smooth. But the second part of this is actually pretty cool, is that when all of your stress slots are marked, you gain a +1 bonus to your proficiency for damage rolls. This means that if we were to continuously use kick and we don't have any more uses of that, when we have that maxed out, well, you could, I guess, use it to mark an HP point, but no one's doing that. But what you would do is you now get an additional D10 when you use Power Push, which isn't nothing. If your stress is all the way tapped out and you've been using your resources, you're in a situation where this might actually be something that would be good. Or maybe what I'll do is make a character that is just focused on being entirely stressed out, have a stressed out build. That'd be kind of silly, but it could be fun. Now, another feature that you may want to consider taking, especially if you're planning on being sort of that support character, is the Book of Codex. And one of the things that's in there that I think is the most important is Rune Circle. And what this allows you to do is you mark a stress and create a temporary magical circle on the ground where you stand. And all adversaries within melee range who enter take 2d12 plus 4 magic damage and are knocked back to very close range. So you could use this a couple different ways. You could jump into a mob of enemies and drop this, or you could put this in an area close to like a sorcerer or a bard who's playing support and let them stand in it. So when an enemy comes in towards them, it automatically repels them back and deals damage. So really, really good utility here, but kind of going for trying to put out the most consistent, sustainable damage as much as possible. So I think trying to maximize kick and getting at least an extra three uses of that with Second Wind and the ability to potentially increase the or reduce the stress or HP for an ally just on having a high enough spellcast roll, I think is a great feature. So at level 3, we are going to be increasing our HP and our stress slot by 1, maxing that out for this team. And this is going to be giving us 8 points of health as well as 8 stress, which is going to feel really good as the, de facto tank of the party. And for level 4, I'm more than likely just going to boost my evasion here. So, if you felt like there was maybe a domain card that you wanted to take but just didn't, you could just mark that and don't worry about raising your evasion and go get whatever that card you've been itching at to get. Maybe it's that first one to get some telepathy going, but yeah, you've got options. So at level 4, there aren't any major domain cards that I'm absolutely in love with between the Codex and Splendor domains. But if I'm going to be building the best Eldritch Knight that I can, I'm more than likely going to be taking the Book of Grin, which gives us Arcane Deflection. And what this basically says is that once per long rest, we can spend a hope to negate the damage of an attack targeting you or an ally within very close range. So basically, the GM rolls that critical hit, it's inflicting severe damage. You just drop your hope, use Arcane Deflection, and your allies, or maybe even yourself, are going to be very thankful that you did. You also get a couple of other things that are nice. Time Lock. This is just you target an objective within far range. That objective stops in time and space exactly where it is until your next spell casting roll. If it tries to move, it has to make a spell cast roll against them to maintain the spell. Or if a creature tries to move it, makes a spell cast roll. That's okay, but Wall of Flame actually isn't bad. If you take a look at this one, this just basically says make a spell cast roll. On a success, create a wall of magical flame between 2 points within far range. All creatures in its path must choose a side to be on. Anything that subsequently passes through the wall takes 4d10 plus 3 magic damage. That's a pretty solid damage dealing spell, but it says in anything that subsequently passes through the wall. So that wording's a little strange to me. Does that mean that if a character or an adversary tries to make it through the wall, then basically they've got to take that damage? So that could be pretty painful for your allies if you split the party up. So just something to think about, but always a good option to have. Now, at level 5, this is where we now enter tier 3 of play. So the first thing that we get is we're going to be getting, obviously, uh, an additional experience at +2, which we got from the last one. Don't know if I mentioned that, but you do get an additional experience. And you clear all the marks on your character trait. So basically, you can level up, the abilities that we had previously marked again. But you also get a +1 bonus to your proficiency. And this is important because now we are rolling 3d10 when we use Power Push. But we also gain a couple different additional options. So the first thing, as you can see here, we've got all the same features that we have before. But what you now have is the ability to take an upgraded subclass for one of your 2 actions, or down below, you've got to mark both. So you can't do one at the top and one at the bottom. If you just want to do one of these 2, you actually it's what you're doing. You're committing your whole level up to this. And I think that almost with every character, especially if we're building damage focused characters, what we are going to do is almost always increase our proficiency by another 1. So what we then do is from level 4 to level 5, we go from having a proficiency of 2 to a proficiency of 4. And that's a big deal because now what we're doing is rolling 4d10 +2 if we're continuing to use Power Push, or if we're using a broadsword, it's 4d8, maybe if 4d8 plus 3 if you have an improved one. But we're now in tier 3, which is awesome. So the other thing that you can do is this is where you can actually multi-class in the game. And this is why it's really important for our character builds to try to get the character thematically online as quickly as possible, because we are probably halfway through our campaign by now, being level 5, max level's 10. So a couple different options you have here, but yeah, at level 5, I've got to take that proficiency +1 because adding extra, d10 worth of damage or an extra dice roll for the abilities that I use is going to be massive for us. So for our level 5 domain card, I am more than likely going to be taking Teleport. And this is a pretty cool spell. So what this says is that once per long rest, you can instantly teleport yourself to any number of willing targets within close range to a place you've been before. You choose one of the following options and you make a spellcast roll, which you got to roll a 16. Uh, a place you know very well, you get a +3 bonus to the roll. A place you visited frequently, you gain a +1 bonus. If you visit the place infrequently, there's no modifier, and if you've only been there once, it's a -2 penalty. So on a success, you appear where you were intended to go, and on a failure, you appear off course within range of failure determining how far off course you are. So this is a really cool spell if you've got to get to or from someplace. Pretty awesome. You're in danger. Go ahead and gather the party and teleport you guys to the entrance or maybe back to your guys's starting town, right? Wherever you decide to go, uh, you potentially have the ability to. So I think that this is really cool, really flavorful, and I think it kind of mixes well with some of the utility that you could get as a Eldritch Knight. Now, with that being said, there is one major honorable mention, and that is because you have access to the Splendor domain at level 5, you get Smite. And this is just basically says once per rest, you spend 3 hope to charge your powerful smite. And when you next successfully attack with a weapon, you double the result of your damage roll, and this attack deals magic damage regardless of the weapon's damage type. So this could be a massive damage output, and in some cases it might be a little bit overkill just because of the fact you might already rolling 4d10 plus 2, right? And maybe even additional d10 if you're rolling with fear at this point. Might be a little bit overkill. But let's just do the math at this here at level 5. So if you are rolling 4d10, or let's just, yeah, 4d10, that's 5.5 points on average, right? So that's 22 points of damage plus 2 is 24. If we are going to be adding our fear die for that, that's another 5.5 points of damage. So you are looking at about 29.5 points of damage. If you were to smite, you're basically doing 59 points of damage, and that's bonkers. So, I'd have to look at the adversary sheets to see if there's, maybe a boss or something you would use this on to try and, get some damage to them, like right off the rip. But it is a very powerful opportunity that you could have. But unfortunately, you can only use it once per rest. So it's not like something you could bank up, 6 of your hope and just hit them twice and try to, do a ton of damage to a boss or something like that. So something important to know. So at level 6, what we are going to be doing is we are going to be increasing our agility and our knowledge by 1. So that's going to be giving us, let's take a look here, an agility of 3 and a knowledge of 4. And in addition to that, we are now going to be taking our upgraded subclass card. Bum, ba, da, bum. And so if we look here, this is our specialization. And what's unique about this is we're going to get 2 additional features. The first is called Conjure Shield. You maintain a protective barrier of magic while you have at least 2 hope and add your proficiency to your evasion. Now, this is huge for us at level 6. So I want you to think about just this feature. As long as you have 2 hope banked up, you now have an additional +4 that you're adding to your evasion. So your evasion goes from an 11 to a 15 with this subclass feature. That is awesome. Now, the other thing that we get, and this is just another bonus, is that we get Fueled by Fear, which is the extra magic damage you get from Face Your Fear now increases to 2d10. So now what we've done is we've just added another 2.75 points of damage just on top of it for the increased subclass feature. And that's kind of a big deal. So to put it in perspective is if you just take a look at the weapons table, every time you upgrade a tier of play, they're basically adding a +3 to the weapon. So a D8 weapon at tier 1 does a D8 +3 at tier 2, a D8 +6 at tier 3, and a D8 +9 at tier 4. So this is basically just like on average getting an extra tier for any weapon that you're using. But our weapon is Power Push, which is awesome because that's already increasing by your proficiency and it's a D10. So this just makes it so you are just kind of hitting pretty hard on a consistent basis and rolling lots of dice, which is the best thing about TTRPGs. So at level 6, our domain card that we're going to be taking is Sigil of Retribution. So you mark an adversary within close range, and what happens is the GM gains a fear, and whenever the marked adversary deals damage to you or any of your allies, you place a D8 on this card, and you can have a number equal to your level, which at this point is 6. So what I love about this ability just right off the gate is that this is going to scale up with us. This is going to be something that we keep on, and it's going to be something that doesn't ever go out of style, which I love. And what you read here is when you successfully attack the marked adversary, roll the dice on this card and add the total to your damage roll, then clear the dice. The effect ends when the marked adversary is defeated or you cast Sigil of Retribution again. So, a couple things. One, there's no resources, but we are giving the GM a resource. So we are giving him fear. So if he's tapped out in fear, use it and, tough luck, GM. Start spending that stuff. Just kidding. Don't do that. It'll kill us. But at the same time, what's really nice about this is that we can cast it on the same adversary again. And what I really like is that if you think about the damage this does, if an adversary is hitting a bunch of your characters or you guys are rolling with fear, you can really bank this up. If you, for some reason, are able to bank up the maximum amount of D8s on this card before you get your next hit off, you're going to be adding on average 21 points of damage in addition to all the other things that we're doing with this card. And that is just absolutely awesome. Huge fan of this. So really cool. Feel like it kind of fits right into the theme of the Eldritch Knight. So at level 7, we are going to be increasing our hit points and our stress slots. So we have 9 HP and 9 stress slots. Sorry, not armor slots. Hopefully, you've been getting some different armor, increasing your capacity as far as your armor score goes, which I'm sure you will at this point in time. Again, if not, your GM's a sadist. But yeah, that's going to be the first, the two things that we're going to be doing for level 7. At level 7, we are undoubtedly going to be taking Codex Touched. And here's what this card says is when you have 4 or more of the domain cards in your of Codex domain cards in your loadout, you gain the following benefits. 1, you can mark a stress to add your proficiency to a spellcast roll. That is awesome because now what this effectively does is it makes it so we using our blade, our broadsword to strike our enemies down using power push are no longer being able to do 4d10. We can mark a stress and add a 5th d10. Now, you're still probably better off if you are did take the fawn background and using the kick. Mathematically, you're still probably better off with the 2d6 as opposed to the 1d10, but you could add both. So you'd be marking 2 stress to do that. And I think that's just a fantastic feature. It's great. So we're already using a majority of our loadout is going to be in Codex. So having this is just an extra arrow in the quiver. Then what we do is the other thing you get is once per rest, you can replace this card with another without paying a recall cost. Not sure, we use this, but nice to have it as a little bit of utility if we need it. So now we are going to move to level 8. And this means that we are now officially in tier 4 of play. So if you take a look, you get that additional experience with the +2. And then you gain a +1 to your proficiency. So now we go from 4 for our proficiency to 5. And you can bet that what we are going to do is increase our proficiency by 1 for this level. So now our proficiency is at 6. So what this means is that when we succeed on a spell cast with Power Push, we are doing 6d10 plus 2. And if we succeed with Fear, we're doing 8d10 plus 2, which is awesome. So let's do a quick power check. If we succeed on a spell cast roll with Hope, we are going to be doing 6d10 plus 2, plus we can mark a stress to increase that by another d10, making that 7d10. And then we can mark a secondary stress to have 2d6. So on average, when you add that all up, that is going to be 47.5 points of damage just on a success with Hope. And if we end up using our succeeding with Fear, then that goes up by another 11, making that 58.5 points of damage on average by using Power Push. That is absolutely incredible. And even if you don't have the stress to do the other abilities, you're still putting out a ton of damage. 33, I think it's 35 just by itself, and 46 if you are just putting out the uh, dice with fear. So uh, it's a ton of damage. You're still controlling the battlefield, and you've got lots of HP and resources to use, and some other utility magical effects at the gate. So big level for us at level 8. So for our level 8 domain card, we are going to dip back into Splendor, and we're going to be taking Stunning Sunlight. This is an incredibly powerful spell, and if you are playing a wizard or a seraph, I strongly recommend taking it. Let's read what it does. So you make a spell cast roll to unleash powerful rays of sunlight against all adversaries in front of you within far range. So one, I like that the range on this is far range, so giving you some more options to hit multiple enemies at further distances. On a success, spend any number of hope and force that many targets you succeed against to make a reaction roll. Okay. So basically, the reaction roll is 14. And what you're doing is, let's say you have 4 enemies in front of you and you have 6 hope built up. You're going to spend 4 of that hope and you're targeting all 4 of those allies. Now, if they succeed, they are going to be taking 3d20 plus 3 magic damage, which on average, which on a success is going to be 34.5 points of damage per target. That's big. But if the targets that fail, end up taking 4d20 plus 5. So targets that succeed end up taking 3d20 plus 3 points of damage, which equals 34.5 points of damage on average for targets that succeed. Targets that fail take 4d20 plus 5 magic damage, which ends up being 47 points of damage. So not only do they take this damage, but they also have the stun conditions. And while they're stunned, they can't take reactions and can't take any other actions until they clear this condition. This is very powerful. I think it's, again, one of the better spells in the game. One, I like that it does cost hope, but you're not limited by it costs 3 hope to activate. You might only have 2 hope, and there might be 2 enemies. Or if there's 5 enemies, you can spend 2 hope and do some pretty solid damage output to them. So another way to use hope, and it's got some good range on it. So love this spell. So at level 9, we're going to be increasing our traits. So we're going to be jumping the agility trait to a +4. And we're going to take our knowledge and cap it out at 5. So we are all maxed out on the 2 stats that we really care about. The other thing that we're going to be doing is we are going to be taking our upgraded subclass. So at level 9, we are going back and getting our mastery for School of War. So the 2 abilities that you get here are Thrive and Chaos. So when you succeed on an attack, you can mark a stress after rolling damage to force the target to mark an additional hit point. This is nice. This is just marking a stress to increase the damage that they're going to take. Now, off the top of my head, I don't know that if an enemy is taking 3 points of damage, you can mark a stress to have them make an additional hit point. I think it would probably work, and I'd probably rule it, especially if you are using a resource to do that. But that's just something you want to check with your DM with, or maybe consult the rules, because that's not something I'm 100% sure on. I've only run one of these games. I've been a player in most of my experiences with Daggerheart. So the second feature that we get is Have No Fear. Now, the extra magic damage that you get from Face Your Fear increases to 3d10. So that just makes our damage output even better. Just by going School of War as our choice for our Eldritch Knight, at this point, we have increased our average damage by 8.25 just from this class feature, which is awesome. Again, I know it doesn't work on every roll, but again, 3d10 that's proccing approximately 50% of the time is still a good damage output. So yeah, love this. Think it's on point for the Eldritch Knight, and level 9's feeling really good. At level 9 now, if you succeed just on a power push with fear, you are doing 10d10 worth of damage plus 2. So you're doing 57 points of damage, and you can mark an additional stress to punch that up to 64 points of damage to a single target. So not bad, and you might have some better uses for your stress, but I think that having that option and then taking second win like we did back at level 3 just gives us more of that flexibility. So I think this is just a really awesome almost capstone that we have for our Eldritch Knight. Level 9, I think that the obvious choice when you're playing a wizard is Disintegration Wave. So basically what this does is you make a spell cast roll and you have to get an 18. And you can use this once per long rest, but on a success, the GM basically tells you which adversaries within range have a difficulty of 18 or lower, and you can mark a stress for each one that you wish to hit with this spell. And these enemies are just killed. They can't come back to life by any means. So you are basically, especially now that we have like 9 stress, you could walk into a mob of enemies and if you hit your spellcast roll, which is also why we want to still prioritize increasing our knowledge and not just focusing on a weapon, you could walk in and basically have a have a situation where if there's, you know, 10 enemies out there, you could just kind of push yourself to the limit and go ahead and just wipe out any, as many as you can that have a difficulty of 18 or lower. That's so cool. I think just the you kind of just like sticking your sword in the ground and pushing yourself to the limit and just having this massive magical explosion just coming wiping a ton of enemies off the map would just be absolutely awesome and probably one of the most badass things I can think of. So level 9, pretty awesome for us. So at level 10, we are going to be capstoning here. And what I would do is just increase our HP, increase our stress. This gives us 10 HP and 10 stress, which ton of resources for us to use as we're sort of hitting the end of our campaign. Now for level 10, because again, we are building the Eldritch Knight to be the best support character we possibly can, with the exception of some couple of different awesome damage spells we took, like from the Splendor domain. We're going to basically capstone, and for our 10th level domain card we're going to take is Transcendent Union. And what this does is it says once per long rest, you can spend 5 hope to cast a spell on 2 or more willing creatures. Until your next rest, when a creature connected by this union would mark stress or hit points, the connected creatures can choose who marks it. So, what this allows you to do is one, basically for your whole party, if you have 5 hope, be the person who is either taking all the damage or distributing it to other party members. So, let's say you've got the bard who is down to his last hit point. Well, if he's got Transcendent Union, you can basically work with the other party members of who's taking that damage for them, right? So he gets hit with that huge attack that's going to put him down. You can say, well, I've got 10 HP, so I'm going to take 2 points of that, or um, let's say you've got maybe the rogue hasn't been taking any damage because their evasion's so high. Well, now they could take 2 points of damage to offset that. So I think that this capstone it just sort of solidifies the Eldritch Knight as the ultimate support player that you can make. And we have done it. We have created the Eldritch Knight in Daggerheart. So let me know in the comments below what you think of the build. What are some of the changes you make? And you maybe give you some reasons why. And I would love to hear from you guys what classes you'd like me to make next. If there's something that you're struggling with or there's an archetype that you just can't quite nail, let me know in the comments below because I would love to kind of put that as the next build video. And until next time, my hope is that everybody rolls with hope. So talk to you guys soon.